Welcome. Let's go to James chapter 2, verse 17. This is another 5 minutes of faith. All right, we're in James chapter 2, verse 17. I'm talking to you today about the foundations of faith. In order to be an expert in any subject or field, you have to first learn the ABCs, the basics, building blocks, and lay a foundation of understanding in that field. Well, faith is the same way. We need to develop our faith and grow in our faith and become an expert at walking by faith. But you can't do that unless you know the foundations, unless you have a grasp on the ABCs of faith. What is faith? How do I get faith? And what do I do with faith? How does faith work? I believe that we continually go back to these things. We continually build upon these things. You will be able to walk by faith more effectively. Well, I want to talk to you today about what does faith do? Faith must be released. Listen, let me go back and review a little bit. Faith is simply what you believe. How do I get faith? Faith comes by hearing and accepting as truth what you hear. And then finally, faith must be released. In order to have faith working, you've got to let it be working in your life. Amen. That's a pretty simple concept. But here in James chapter 2, verse 17, it says, thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Now, it doesn't mean that it's non-existent. It means it's non-active. It's dormant. It's not doing you any good. You can say you believe, but if there's not the corresponding action to faith, then it's inactive. In verse 18, he says, but someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works. See, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Evidence. Where is the evidence of your faith? The evidence of our faith ought to be the releasing of our faith. We ought to be hearing faith. We ought to be seeing faith. Did you know that faith can be seen? You know, there was times there was once when Paul was preaching to a crowd, and there was a man who was lame or disabled in some way. And while Paul was preaching, he looked at him, and Paul saw that the man had faith to be healed. And Paul said, stand up straight on your feet. What did Paul see, I wonder? You know, Jesus could see and recognize faith. If we can recognize faith, then you and I ought to be able to recognize faith within ourselves as well. He says, show me your faith without your works. I will show you my faith by my works. Verse 19, you believe that there is one God. You do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But do you want to know, foolish man, that faith without works is dead? Again, faith must be released. Faith must govern what you think, say, and do. Let me say that again. Faith must govern what you think, say, and do. This is how we release our faith. What are you thinking on? Are you thinking by faith, or are you thinking by the natural? What are you speaking? What's coming out of your mouth? Jesus says that the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. This is how you'll know what's in your heart, by what's in your mouth. And what are you doing? What kind of works are in your life? What things are you practicing in your life? Are you practicing faith, or are you practicing things of sin? Look what James chapter 1, verse 5 through 8 says. If any lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all freely or liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Verse 6, but let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea that's driven and tossed by the wind. Verse 7. For let not that man suppose he'll receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. That's strict right there. Now that, to me, is a little concerning, because I'll ask and I'll pray, and then the battle begins. And my mind starts telling me, is God really going to do this? The impossible, the thing you can't see, is it really going to come to pass? But my heart tells me yes. Listen, if your heart condemns you, don't be afraid. God's greater than your heart, and God's word is greater than your heart. Your heart condemning you is not necessarily doubt in your heart. It's your head. It's the thoughts in your head telling you this thing is not going to come to pass. God is not going to do what he said he would do. You know that those thoughts, you don't have to hold on to those thoughts. You can let faith govern your thoughts. And just because you may think a certain way or things may look a certain way doesn't mean you have to speak it that way. Don't speak doubt, speak faith. Speak it, no matter what it looks like, no matter how you feel, no matter what people tell you. Speak what God speaks. Only agree with what God says. And then finally, walk in it. Walk by faith. If you believe what God says, then you should act like it. This is how we release our faith. It's simple. It's what you believe. It comes quickly. Do you hear the word? Accept as truth what you heard. And finally, release your faith by thinking, speaking, and acting by faith. I'm going to continue talking more about the foundations of faith tomorrow. I hope you can be here for 5 minutes of faith.